Among other traits of character which are common to man and beast, says a writer, is the sense of humor. This is developed in various ways. Mostly it assumes the form of teasing or annoying others, and deriving amusement from their discomfort. This is the lowest form of humor and is popularly known among ourselves as practical joking. Sometimes both with man and beast, it takes the form of bodily torture, the struggles of the victim being highly amusing to the torturer. Civilized man has now learned to consider the infliction of pain upon another as anything but an amusement, and would sooner suffer the agony than inflict it upon a fellow creature. But to the savage, there is no entertainment so fascinating as the torturing of a human being. Take, for example, the North American Indian tribes, among whom the torture is a solemn usage of war, which every warrior expects for himself if captured, and is certain to inflict upon any prisoner whom he may happen to take. The ingenuity with which the savage wrings every nerve of the human frame and kills his victim by sheer pain is absolutely fiendish. And yet the whole tribe assemble around the stake and gloat upon the agonies which are being endured by a fellow creature. Similarly, the African savage tortures either man or woman who is accused of witchcraft employing means which are too horrible to be mentioned. Yet even in these cases, the cruelty seems to be in a great degree owing to obtuseness of perception, and the savage who ties his prisoner to a stake and perforates all the sensitive parts of his body with burning pine splinters acts very much like a child who amuses itself by catching flies, pulling off their wings and legs, and watching their unavailing efforts to escape. I did not know whether it is the case now or not, but some 20 years ago, I saw cockchafers, a large beetle publicly sold in Paris for children to torture to death. The amusement being to run a hooked pin through their tail, tie a thread to it, and see the poor insect spin in the air. After it was too enfeebled to spread its wings, it was slowly dismembered, the child being greatly amused at its endeavors to crawl, as leg after leg was pulled off. I rescued many of these wretched insects from the thoughtlessly cruel children, and released them from their sufferings by instantaneous death. In Italy, a similar custom prevails, though in a more cruel form, the creatures which are tortured by way of sport being more capable of suffering pain than are insects. Birds are employed for the amusement of children, just as are the cockchafers in France. A string is tied to the leg, and the unfortunate bird, after its powers of flight are exhausted, is generally plucked alive and dismembered. It is not done from any idea of cruelty, but from sheer incapacity to understand that a bird or a beast can be a fellow creature. The Italians are notorious for their cruel treatment of animals, and if remonstrance be made, they are quite astonished and reply, "Non è cristiano," it is not a Christian. Among the favorite methods of Indian torture may be mentioned the tying of the unfortunate prisoner to stakes in the ground, then having a small pyrotechnic celebration by filling his ear carefully with gunpowder and shooting it off. Another favorite amusement is to build a small fire of resinous pine kindling on the victim's stomach and let it burn slowly. They usually make the fire small to prolong the effect, or they sometimes even drive small pine splitters into the flesh of the prisoner and ignite them. Some of the tribes south have a very ingenious way of torturing. They take the victim and gag him, with his mouth open, then tie him down by the side of a large ant hill. They do not always confine themselves to the scalp. Should the capturing party be numerous, and there is not scalp enough to go around, they sometimes continue their operations to the beard, mustache, and eyebrows. The above are the tortures as practiced chiefly on the male prisoners. What the female prisoners are subjected to the columns of a newspaper will not allow me to describe, but judging from the other tortures, you can readily imagine that no feeling of mercy or compassion, for the Indian is totally devoid of these qualities, will or cannot prevent him from performing the most horrible tortures on the females, to whom death would be 1,000 times preferable. It is quite a common thing for the frontiersman, during the Indian raids, and when himself and family are attacked and there is no hope of escape, to present himself and his family to their God, in preference to capture and torture. There is little use in talking to a frontier settler who knows the Indian nature, or who has lost, perhaps, a wife and children in the border warfare, about peace with the Sioux, or of civilizing by the Quaker peace policy, unpreceded by a thorough subjugation by military force. For an answer, you will apt to get a look of anger or incredulity, with the remark, "Stranger, ain't you a tenderfoot out here? Have you ever fit with the Injuns?" The panic in Texas respecting the Indians continues unabated. More than 100 farms and houses have been abandoned. 400 Indians passed Fort Chadbourne on the 23rd, not disguising their warlike intentions. The people of Parker County are organizing rangers to patrol the settlements. 5 Indians scalped Mrs. Sherman on the frontier and left her for dead with an arrow in her side. She lived 3 days and gave birth to a child a few moments before death. The Gage and Landam families were all murdered, excepting a daughter of each, who were taken prisoners, and after having been taken a long distance and suffered cruelly, they were ordered in plain English to return home, which they did in a state of nudity, to find their homes stripped of everything, even the bedclothes. In this condition they were found by Captain Hamaber and his party. Cheyenne, Wyoming, July 2nd. A letter from South Pass says that on June 25th, Indians stole from that vicinity 98 head of horses and mules. The citizens pursued, but all their horses being gone, could not retake the stock. They found the bodies of Dr. Bard, Harney Morgan, and Mr. Mason, they having been tortured to death by Indians. Morgan was scalped, the king bolt of a wagon driven through his head, and the tendons down his spine taken out for bowstrings. The Indians who committed these depredations were Arapahoes and Sioux. News of an Indian outrage has been received from the ranch of Head and Hurst, situated in Animas Valley, Cochise County, Arizona, 6 miles from the Mexican line. B.F. Cady, while alone in charge of the ranch, was surprised by Indians and shot through both legs above the knees. He was then stripped of his clothing and scalded with boiling water, and afterward held on a stove and roasted. The Indians finally pounded his head into a jelly and otherwise horribly mutilated him. The body was thrown into the yard, where it was found by the Mexican custom house guards. From the number of moccasin tracks, the guard estimated that the party numbered between 30 and 40. After killing Cady, they separated, about one half of them remaining in the mountains nearby. The balance, taking all the horse stock on the ranch with them, passed up through Guadalupe Canyon. The Indians continued to harass the scattered settlements of western Texas, running off horses and occasionally taking life. 4 men hunting on the headwaters of the Guadalupe were surprised and killed in camp, 2 only of the party escaping to the woods. A young man named Herman Runge was found dead near Sisterdale, with 7 arrows in his body and a long knife stuck through his heart. A family of a man, his wife and child, were killed on the Rio Blanco. Numerous similar instances are reported in late Texas papers. The Sioux Indians in Minnesota recently captured a Chippewa and burned him at Glencoe, with all the refined tortures of Indian cruelty. Although burned by a slow fire for several hours and scalped and maimed. During the process, the Chippewa did not betray his anguish by a single token, but bore the martyrdom with Indian stoicism. It is supposed this outrage was committed by the Sioux in revenge for the horrible murder of a Dakota woman in the fall, near Lac Qui Parle.